Micah Cates had also spent a bad night. Somehow he felt responsible for Luck, wanted to help her, but she was nowhere to be found. A miner had told him about the big fight between Black and the newcomer, and he had gone back to the Silver Bar but could not find anybody who knew what had become of Luck. One of the bartenders remembered seeing her talking with Duke Steele, but had not seen her after the fight. Nearly all night Micah had sat on Luck's doorstep, waiting for her, wondering what had happened to her. It was after daylight when he came down the street to Louis Yen's laundry. The door was closed, but Micah opened it and peered inside. Louis Yen was humped up on a box beside his ironing board, his head swathed in bandages. He was smoking a long pipe while he slowly whetted his long knife with a tiny hone. "Hiya, Louis," greeted Micah, coming inside. "Seen anything of Luck?" Louis stopped honing and stared at Micah. His old face seemed to have aged years in one night. "Yo no find?" he asked softly. "Dang it all no," Micah was very positive. "I've looked all over for her, Louis. What happened to you?" Louis's hand went to his bandage, and he shook his head. "You don't know?" asked Micah. "I know," nodded Louis. "Meb know too much, yo sabe." "Thasso, whatcha mean, Louis?" "Know too much, Meb die," ominously. "Aw shucks, what's got into ya?" Louis picked up his hone and knife and began to put a razor edge on the long knife. The room was silent, but for the keen ween of the hone against fine steel. "Ya make me nervous," complained Micah. "I asked ya if ya knew where Luck's Sleed is, but ya never said." "No can do," Louis shook his head, but did not look up. "I hear two men talk in dark law's night." Louis Yen kept very quiet. He tested the blade on the ball of his thumb and began honing again, while he continued in a sing-song tone. "One man say want Lil Jill, and other man say why wait fo, big man say what to do? Yo, tack 'em now. One man say we fix 'em scheme, they go way. Louis Yen no can go to sea. Louis Yen by mebi gonsi Lil Jill and Finn Lil Jill talk to one man. Louis Yen go outside see what can Finn, by mebi big fight. Louis Yen see two men in dark carry Lil Jill. She scream but no can make hear. Louis Yen hear. Louis Yen try catch Lil Jill. No can do." Louis pointed to the bandage on his head, and again he tested the edge of his knife. "Somebody steal her," gasped Micah, getting to his feet. Louis nodded slowly, and the lines deepened in his old yellow face. "Louis," Micah's voice quavered, "Louis, do ya know who it was?" "No can do," Louis shook his head. "One man wear big hat white hat, yo sabe." "With silver trimmin'?" asked Micah quickly. "Yes SS," answered Louis. "Yo sabe now." Micah nodded quickly. He knew that Duke Steele was the only man in Calico who wore that kind of headgear. "No sabe," Louis shook his head. "Wi he steal Lil Jill, long time she look fo him, plenty glad fo see him." "I don't sabe it either, Louis. Who do ya reckon they meant when they spoke about the big man? Who is he?" "No can tell, Micah. He say not wait fo big man, by mebi we fin out. Ah h. Louis's gnarled thumb tested the edge of the knife and had found it perfect. He picked up his pipe and began smoking. "Well, ain't we goin' look for her?" demanded Micah impatiently. "No can do," Louis shook his head. "Hunt now never fin, yo sabe. Lil Jill plenty safe now, too much look meb almos fin no safe." "You reckon they can't afford to let us find her?" I's no good fo hunt now. Somebody talk by mebi." "All right, Louis, but I sure want to get hands on the dirty coyotes that stole her." "Plenty time, yo wait," advised Louis softly. Micah nodded and went outside. It was blistering hot and not even a dog was in sight on the street. He went slowly down past the silver bar and into the Mojave. Duke Steele was sitting at a card table, playing solitaire. He smiled and nodded at Micah, who sat down at the table. Micah noticed that Duke was not wearing a hat, and there was no sign of the hat on the table nor on any of the chairs. Neither of the men spoke. It was stifling hot in there, and finally Duke threw the cards aside and leaned back in his chair. "This country ain't cooled off none since I was here a year ago," observed Duke. He had placed his hands on the table, and Micah could see that they were swollen and bruised. Duke noticed Micah's glance and grinned. "Compliments of Pete Black," he remarked, indicating his hands. "Have ya seen him today?" Micah shook his head. He had heard of the fight. Duke studied Micah Cates for a while and then leaned across the table toward him as he asked softly, "Do you know where Luck Sleed is, Cates?" Micah shook his head. "No, do you?" Duke smiled and shook his head. "No, but I'd sure like to, you betcha." Micah could not help feeling that Duke was in earnest. Either that, or he was a good actor and wanted to find out how much Micah Cates knew. "When did ya see her last?" queried Micah. "Just before I fought with Pete Black. I was talkin' with her when the fight started and I took a hand in it. When the fight was over, she had disappeared." Micah blinked over this information, but he was not going to let Duke Steele know his suspicions. Then, before he thought, he blurted the question, "Steele, who is the big man you're workin' for?" Duke stared closely at Micah and leaned slowly back in his chair. "Big man?" he asked. "What do you mean, Cates?" "You know what I mean, Steele." "Do I?" Duke smiled at Micah's anxious face. "Listen," said Micah, "I ain't sayin' I ain't afraid of you, Steele. You've licked 2 good men with your hands since you came here, and I sabe what you can do with a gun, but—" Micah stopped and leaned closer. "But just the same I'm askin' ya what ya done with Luck Sleed." "What I done with her?" Duke's smile was gone now and his voice was hard. "Would I be lookin' for her if I knew where she is, Cates?" Cates shook his head but was unconvinced. "What do you mean by big man?" demanded Duke. Micah licked his lips slowly, but decided to try and bluff it through. "You and another man talked about a big man last night, Steele, and it sounds like you was workin' for him. One of ya wanted Luck Sleed and decided to steal her. That fight was just a blind to steal her out of the crowd." Duke squinted closely at Micah, whose face was beaded with perspiration, and a glimmer of understanding came to him. "Did you hear me talkin' to another man?" demanded Duke. Micah shook his head. "Then how do ya figure it was me?" "One of the men that stole Luck Sleed was wearin' a big white sombrero with silver trimmin's, Steele. Where is your hat?" Duke shook his head. "Pardner, I reckon the verdict is easy to read. I'm much obliged to ya just the same." He leaned over and picked up the cards, paying no attention to Micah, who got to his feet and went back to the street. At the doorway, he looked back at Duke, who was building another solitaire layout. Micah scratched his head and tried to review just what Duke Steele had said. He had not told who the big man was, nor had he admitted stealing Luck Sleed. Somehow, Micah felt that Duke Steele had had nothing to do with it. He had thanked Micah for some information, but Micah was not aware that he had explained anything to him. That night, French, Black, and Curlew met in Curlew's room at the rear of the Mojave. Black's lips were puffed and discolored, one eye was as purple as a plum, and all of his front teeth were missing. He had not been able to eat solid food that day, and whiskey was a torture to his sore lips and mouth. French was in sympathy with Black because his own jaw was still sore from Duke Steele's fist, but Curlew was rather amused at both of them. "I'll kill him if it's the last thing I ever do," declared Black. "I don't care a damn what Lemoyne says." "If I was goin' to kill him, I'd hire it done," said Curlew. "After seein' what he done to both of you fellers, I'm workin' shy of that hombre. Is he such a hell of a fighter, or are you Jaspers overrated?" French and Black made no reply. Curlew knew that both of them were well known as fighters, and he was only joking them about their recent defeats. "He's a gunman, too," said French, as though admitting that Steele was a good fighter with his fists. "A year ago he kinda cleaned up around here." "Whatcha tryin' to do, scare yourself or us?" demanded Black. "I'm tellin' ya some history, Black." "History don't repeat itself, French. I ain't a danged bit scared of this hard-headed fool, even if you are." "Still, ya don't know him and Lemoyne are hooked up," said French. "I'd advise layin' off him until we hear from Lemoyne and see where this feller stands." Came a knock on the door, but before anyone could speak, a man came into the room. He was grimy from the desert, and his face was brick-red from the intense heat. "Just got in," he informed them huskily. "Damn horse went down on me about 3 miles down the road, and I had to walk the rest of the way." "What's the idea, Pell?" asked French nervously. The newcomer picked up a bottle of liquor from the table and took a long drink. "Plumb dried out inside," he explained, sitting down on the bunk and half removing his boots before he continued. "Telluride sent me in. Said that he got the ore, but that he saw Lemoyne about a minute after he got loaded, and he's plumb scared that Lemoyne saw them. He went over and woke up the stage driver, and he said that Lemoyne was common to Calico with him T-night." "Hell," exploded French, getting nervously to his feet. "Hang on to yourself," snapped Curlew. "You're as nervous as an old lady, French. Meb he didn't see nothin'." "And if he did," said Black ominously, "are we goin' to eat dirt for Lemoyne? You'd think he was the devil himself." The man called Pell helped himself to more liquor, while the other 3 men pondered deeply. "If ya want my advice," said Black, "I'd say that we better get rid of this Steele right away. Ya know damn well that he's sweet on luck's sleed, French." "Lot of good it's doin' him," grinned French. "If trouble started in the Silver Bar tonight and Steele happened to be there," suggested Curlew meaningly, "Lemoyne never hired us to take care of Steele." French got to his feet again and paced the length of the room several times. He stopped at the table and looked at Black and Curlew, who had been watching him. "Black is right," declared French. "Why should we eat dirt for Lemoyne? Is he any better than we are? Let's take Calico for ourselves and to hell with Lemoyne. I'm tired of taking orders from him. When he shows up here, he's as helpless as any other man, ain't he? How about it?" "That's the idea," applauded Black. "We won't only set into the big game, but we'll run it, eh?" "And take the rake off for ourselves," nodded Curlew. Pell finished the bottle and went back into the saloon, where he got a couple of more drinks and went out. Duke Steele was in the room. He had seen Pell enter the room and knew that Black, Curlew, and French were in there. Pell was just a trifle unsteady on his legs as he went out into the street, and Duke had no difficulty in shadowing him. Several times Pell stopped and looked back, but Duke kept to the heavy shadows. Down near where the road sloped sharply off into the desert, Pell stopped and spoke a word. A moment later another man joined him, and Duke heard the husky voice of Lemoyne as he talked to Pell. Duke was unable to get close enough to find out what the conversation was about, but he heard Lemoyne tell Pell to stable the horses where no one would see them, and a few moments later Lemoyne passed Duke's hiding place, going slowly toward the lighted street. As soon as he was safely past, Duke circled back to the upper end of the street. He was curious to know just why Lemoyne had come secretly to Calico. Something had gone wrong with his plans, that much was sure, and Duke thought it might concern the disappearance of Luck Sleede. He felt sure, after what he had learned from Micah Cates, that French and Curlew were the ones that had kidnapped Luck. There was no question in his mind but what the fight had been started to attract the attention of the crowd, and that Black had thrown the bottle to draw him away from Luck. Of course, Black had not expected it to turn out so badly for him. Duke had lost his hat, which was not part of their plans, but one of them had worn it, possibly on the chance that they might shift the blame in case they were seen by anyone on the street. It was fairly clear to Duke now, the reasons for Louis Yen's hatred. No doubt, thought Duke, the Chinaman recognized me by the hat because there was not another hat like it in Calico. Duke had come in beside Louis Yen's laundry, and now he stopped near the corner. A man was coming toward him, and Duke thought that this might possibly be Lemoyne. As he drew back into the deeper shadows, something descended upon his head, knocking him flat on his face. Dimly he heard voices and felt someone dragging him into the house. In a hazy way he felt them binding his hands, but was unable to prevent them. Gradually the roaring noise died out of his ears and he came back to almost full consciousness, but he did not open his eyes nor try to move. His nose informed him that he was inside of Louis Yen's laundry, and that Louis was talking to someone in his own peculiar pidgin English. By maybe he talk now yo sabe, Louis Yen fin out. That's a damn heathen way of doin' things, replied Micah Cates' voice. I wouldn't do it, Louis. I watch him, stated Louis. He walk after man who meet one man vey big yo sabe. Thasso, Micah was interested. And then you trailed Steele up here and hit him on the head. Yes SS like yo see. By maybe this man tell where is Lil Jill yo sabe. How hot do ya have to get them irons? Asked Micah. Plenty hot. Louis got up and shuffled softly into the rear room. Duke's eyes flashed open. He was lying in the middle of the floor, flat on his back, with both hands tied behind him. Micah Cates was standing near him, watching him closely. Cates, Duke whispered softly, does that Chinaman think I know where Luck Sleede is hidden? Micah glanced swiftly toward the rear, dropped on his hands and knees, and with a swift motion of a knife, cut Duke's hands loose. Guns on the table, he breathed. But Duke did not move. Louis Yen was coming in from the rear room, carrying a flat iron, the handle of which was heavily wrapped in rags. There was a smell of burning cloth as Louis Yen knelt at the feet of Duke Steele and placed the hot iron on the floor. Duke had drawn up his feet, and as Louis took hold of one of his boots, Duke shoved him violently aside, sprang to his feet, grasped the six-shooter and whirled to look down at the little old Chinaman, sprawled on the floor. Louis Yen was not looking at Duke, but at the strands of rope on the floor, strands which had been cut with a very sharp knife. Then he got slowly to his feet, shook his head sadly and sat down on a box, a very sorrowful-looking old Chinaman. I had T do it, Louis Yen, said Micah softly. He's a white man. Duke studied the two of them, pitied them in their puny efforts to get information of Luck Sleede. You don't need to feel bad about it, Louis, said Duke consolingly. Burnin', my feet wouldn't make me tell where that girl is 'cause I don't know. I lost my hat in the fight and somebody stole it. I found you out there in the street. Louis Yen's beady eyes studied Duke's face for a while, unblinking. Yo Don, know where is Lil Jill? No, Duke shook his head. Not any more than you do. No can Finn, Louis shook his head, while the hot iron sent up a vile odor of burning cloth. Duke kicked the iron aside and felt of the lump on his head. It was very sore, but there was little blood. Louis noticed Duke's actions and shook his head sadly. Vey Solly, he muttered. Louis Yen plenty damn fool, yo sabe. Never mind me, grinned Duke. I've got a hard head and I've got an idea. Will you two Jaspers help me work it out? Tell it, grunted Micah Cates. We've tried everything else. Here's what ya got to do, explained Duke. One of ya watch the rear door and the other the front door of the silver bar while I go inside. Watch for Pete Black, French, or Slim Curlew. If any of them come out, follow 'em and find out where they go. Do ya understand? Mo betta, nodded Louis Yen, getting to his feet. And look out, warned Duke. Hell is due to bust loose in Calico tonight, unless I can't read signs, and we're liable to get singed a little. Let her bust, replied Micah. Duke turned to the door. You fellers wait a minute, 'cause I don't want to be seen with ya. Duke went down the street and into the silver bar. There was a fair-sized crowd inside, but the place was orderly. Pete Black was at a poker table, French was at a roulette layout, and Curlew was standing at the bar, talking to the man named Pell, who had brought the message to them from Telluride Taylor. Bud Harvey was one of the bartenders, and he nodded pleasantly to Duke, who stepped in beside Curlew and Pell. Miss Luck ain't got here yet, has she? Asked Duke. Bud Harvey shook his head. No, I ain't seen her today, and I was wonderin' if she wasn't comin' down tonight. None of the boys has seen her today. She's been away, said Duke casually, but she ought to be here pretty quick. Duke felt that Curlew had turned and was looking at him, but he calmly poured out his drink and paid for it. Then he sauntered toward the rear of the room and moved in beside a faro layout where he could turn, facing the room. Curlew walked part way to the door with Pell, but left him and went straight to the poker game and spoke to Pete Black, who got out of his chair. Only a word was exchanged, and Black turned to cash in his chips. Duke glanced at French, who was watching Black and Curlew. Curlew signaled cautiously to French and walked slowly back to the bar, followed in a moment by Black. None of them looked toward Duke, but he knew that 3 pairs of eyes were watching him. To anyone else it would seem that these 3 men were having a friendly drink, but Duke felt that this conference might mean a lot to him. They finished their drink and all walked over to the roulette layout, laughing. Duke walked toward the rear of the room, where the 2-piece orchestra was screeching out a discordant tune, and when he turned and looked toward the roulette game, Pete Black was not there. In fact, he was not in the silver bar. Duke grinned and sauntered down the room until he stood near French and Curlew. A half-drunk miner came in the door and stumbled toward the bar. "Wha's matter with the Mojave?" he asked loudly. "Has she gone out of business?" Several people looked at him curiously, and he seemed to realize that he was the center of interest, so he continued. "Locked up tight, that's what she is. Wha's a matter, eh?" French strode over to the man and grasped him by the arm. "What do ya mean?" he demanded. "Mojave's closed," insisted the drunk. "Lights all out and a padlock on the door." "What the hell does that mean?" queried Curlew. "Who would do that?" French whirled toward the door and Curlew almost trod on his heels in his hurry to get out and see what had happened. Duke grinned as he realized that this was Lemoyne's first move, but he did not know just what it meant. Duke did not know that Black, French, and Curlew had announced their intentions to double-cross Lemoyne, and that Lemoyne knew this. Duke turned and went out the back door where he called softly and was joined by Micah Cates. Black went out the front door, said Duke. Then Louis Yen is on his trail, grinned Micah, and that danged chink could trail a buzzard and never be seen. And that ain't no lie, replied Duke. I know it. As they started around the corner, a bulky figure almost ran into them. Quick as a flash, Duke whipped out his gun and covered the man, who backed against the wall, the face of him showing clear in the moonlight. It was Lemoyne, dangerous as a cornered wolf, who snarled at Duke. You too, eh? Well, damn you, shoot. Duke shook his head, but kept the muzzle of the big six-shooter leveled at Lemoyne's waistline. Not unless I have to, Lemoyne, replied Duke. Better take my advice, said Lemoyne coldly. You'll never have a better chance. Never want a better one, smiled Duke. Meet my friend Micah Cates, Mr. Lemoyne. Ah, hell, exploded Lemoyne. What's the use of all this steel? Courtesy, replied Steele. You fellers ain't never met. And then to Micah, this is the big man ya heard about, Micah. You're talkin' chances on not pullin' that trigger, reminded Lemoyne coldly. Duke laughed. You don't scare me, Lemoyne. You told me that you had some good men up here, but I whipped 2 of them and am willin' to try the other one. I've lost all faith in you, big feller. You picked some fine scorpions to handle this end of the big game. I've found that out, agreed Lemoyne warmly, and that is why I'm up here tonight. How much have they promised you, Steele? A spot in Hell's Depot, grinned Duke. What do you mean, Steele? Just what I said. I didn't like this gang and I had to whip French a few minutes after I landed here. Last night I fought Pete Black and moved most of his teeth. I ain't had no chance to mix with Curlew yet. Lemoyne laughed harshly. I wish I had seen it. Now the question is this: are you still with me, Steele? Nope, Duke shook his head, but added, I'm not against ya, Lemoyne, except in one thing. You can take the Mojave Desert and everything in the danged spot except Luxlead's property. Yeah, got stuck on the girl, did ya, Steele? I'm squeezin' the trigger, said Duke softly, and another remark like that finishes the deal for you. Your hired tin horn stole her last night, Lemoyne. Not on my orders, defended Lemoyne quickly. Mine was a freeze-out game, not a kidnapping. I might beat her out of what she owns, but I'm damned if I'd injure her. You've got a lot of control over your men, ain't ya? I will have when I'm through with 'em, retorted Lemoyne hotly. That's why I'm up here. They don't look for me until mornin', but I choked the truth out of the stage driver. They've been stealin' from me all the time, Steele. I sent a man I could trust to tell 'em that I was common on the night stage, and they talked too much before him. They're goin' to try and shove me out of Calico. And you've only got that one man with ya? Queried Duke. A drunk, do ya realize what you're up against? There's Black, French, Curlew, a handful of gamblers, and all of Black's men from both mines. They're all gettin' their share of the loot. What can one man do against that crowd? By God, I'll show 'em what Lemoyne can do. You're a big-headed fool, snapped Duke. You've dreamed about ownin' the desert until it's gone to your head, Lemoyne. Wake up for a minute and figure out just who you are. One man. Are ya bulletproof? Can ya shoot so fast that ya can buck an army? This job will take a lot of brains, which you ain't got. Lemoyne was silent for several moments, as this seemed to percolate through his mind. No man had ever talked like that to him before. No man had dared to talk like that to Lemoyne. He shrugged his big shoulders and leaned back against the building. Well, Steele, I never thought about it like that. I guess probably I've got the wrong idea. You ain't exactly brainless, remarked Duke. Almost, Lemoyne smiled crookedly. What would you do if you was in my place, Steele? I wouldn't try to fool myself into thinkin' that I was all-powerful, Lemoyne. All right, Lemoyne's tone was almost meek. Got a gun? Lemoyne threw his coat open, disclosing a cartridge belt and 2 heavy guns. Can ya shoot straight? No, Lemoyne was honest. I never was a good shot. It's a wonder ya ever come this close to Bane, a king of the desert, declared Duke. I hired my shootin' done, said Lemoyne half humorously, half bitterly. Well, ya ain't got money enough to hire a trigger finger tonight, declared Duke. So ya better forget ownin' the desert and concentrate on shootin'. You won't lose nothin' by stickin' to me, assured Lemoyne, neither one of you. Aw, forget the pay, grunted Duke. Why did ya close up the Mojave? I scared the devil out of that gang in there, Lemoyne laughed nervously. They all know me. I wanted to get that bunch all together in one place, so I cleaned out the Mojave and locked the door. And by now every one of your hired crooks know that you are in Calico. Lemoyne, you've got a fine chance to never leave Calico alive. There's only one hope left, and that hinges on the fact that you hired a bunch of tin horns to run your business. How much nerve have you got? Why do you ask me that? Queried Lemoyne. Have you got nerve enough to walk into that gang and start shootin'? Do we have to do that, Steele? No, oh, we can run away. Feller can't die but once. Thus Micah Cates, speaking for the first time since they met Lemoyne. I'm a poor runner, said Lemoyne, and there's plenty of time to run when we're scared, Steele. And Luxlead won't lose, queried Duke. Not even what Black's gang stole, said Lemoyne. I've got the smelter lists to check back on it, Steele. You may never be a king, observed Duke, but you are a couple of notches above Bane, a knave. Come on. French and Curlew found the Mojave padlocked and the lights out. Several of the miners who were in the pay of Pete Black followed them. One of the bartenders and a man who had run a roulette outfit for Curlew were in front of the place. What in hell is goin' on here? Demanded Curlew. Hell is right, agreed the gambler. Lemoyne closed the place a few minutes ago. Lemoyne, gasped French. Is he here? He sure is, grunted the bartender. He's here like a wolf, French. But he wasn't due here until mornin', said Curlew in a half-whisper. Why did he? Pell, French's voice broke thinly. Pell came with him, Slim. He heard what we said about talkin' Calico for ourselves. Lemoyne knows now where Telluride's rich ore comes from, and he's up here. With only Pell behind him, snapped Curlew. 2 men and one of them drunk. Get the gangs from both mines. Black will be back in a few minutes. Where S. Steele? Queried French nervously. Damn him, he's a spy of Lemoyne S. I'll get the gang, said one of the miners, and ran heavily toward the rim of Sunshine Alley. Get back in the shadows, advised Curlew. We'll wait for the miners and Black. Calico was strangely silent now. Only the yellow lights of the silver bar made a greenish glow in the blue haze of moonlighted street. It was a land of blocky, grotesque shadows, highlighted by a moon, like a huge globe suspended but a short distance away from the earth. Then, from far down in Sunshine Alley came the thin, indistinct notes of a violin. From out in the desert came the eerie wail of a half-starved coyote. A man in the doorway of the silver bar laughed drunkenly and began singing in a hoarse voice. French cursed audibly. Men were coming up over the rim of Sunshine Alley now and hurrying toward the Mojave. The notes of the violin had ceased. The man in the doorway of the silver bar stopped singing and went back inside. It was Pell, the Lemoyne spy, singing to keep up his courage. Duke Steele heard him singing as he opened the rear door of the silver bar and led Lemoyne and Micah Cates inside. The games were still running and men were at the bar, drinking, but a silence had seemed to settle over the room. A man cursed at Pell, who turned and came back to the bar. Several men glanced curiously at Lemoyne. He was so big that he towered like a giant in the low-ceilinged room. Men were coming in both front and rear doors now, big, hulking miners with the colored muck of the silver mines on their clothes. "Look out," called Duke at Lemoyne. "These are all Black's men. Hell's due to take a recess in a minute." A big miner lurched into Lemoyne, staggering him. It might have been unintentional, but Lemoyne smashed the man full in the face with a terrific blow, and the big miner spun like a top into a roulette table, crashing it down like a mass of kindling. A woman screamed, breaking the momentary silence after the crash. Just outside the door, from somewhere in that mass of men, came the smack of a pistol shot. Pell, who was backed against the bar with arms outspread, flung his arms across his face as though to protect himself, and plunged headlong into the crowd. The place was a bedlam now. Duke saw French and Curlew near the door, but was unable to use his gun in that crush of humanity. Lemoyne was fighting like a great grizzly, using his hands instead of his guns. Micah Cates was lost in the confusion, but Duke felt that the little bow-legged man was giving a good account of himself. Duke managed to get his gun loose and was using it as a club. He had no desire to kill the miners, but he did want to come to close quarters with either Curlew or French. He was dazed and shaken from blows, which seemed to rain on him from every direction. A flying bottle cut his cheek, and the blood ran into his mouth, a salty stream. Blindly, he reversed his gun and shot straight ahead, trying to clear a path to the door. It was a case of 3 against 30, and Duke knew that it was only a question of time until the 30 would win. He went to his knees from a smashing blow on the back of his head, but managed to hang onto his gun. Men walked on him, fell over him, but he surged to his feet and found himself near the door. The bloody face of Fire French leered at him, and he smashed at it with his gun barrel, and French went backward. A bullet seared his neck and the powder burned his chin, but he whirled and tried to shoot Curlew, but a big miner fell into him, knocking him outside the door. The lamps went out and the fight continued in the dark. French and Curlew were screaming orders, trying to tell their men that part of the quarry had escaped. A blaze sprang up from a smashed lamp as Duke staggered into the street, trying to fill his lungs with air and to shake the haze from his brain. He staggered over a huddled figure which fired a gun, the bullet missing him by a yard. Duke saw the man's face and yanked him to his feet. It was Micah Cates, sobbing, cursing. Men were coming out of the silver bar, and they seemed to be still fighting. An orange-colored flash pointed toward Duke and Micah, and a bullet screamed off the rocks at their feet. Duke grasped Micah by the arm and hurried him toward the rim of Sunshine Alley. Both of them staggered, and Duke smiled grimly to think that it was a case of the blind leading the blind. "Not into the alley," wailed Micah. "They'll find us too easy. The tunnels, Steele, climb the hill past Luck's place." "You know this place better than I do, Micah," agreed Duke, "so you laid the way." Both men were reeling, dizzy from their injuries, but they climbed the steep trails up the cliffs, while behind them came the howling of the mob, growing fainter all the time. "God help Lemoyne," panted Duke. "They'll kill him," choked Micah, "but we couldn't help him none. Thank God they're not on our trail yet." Micah led the way into a tunnel, which was so dark that they were forced to travel slowly, feeling their way along. It seemed to Duke that they had gone miles, when Micah drew him at right angles and into another tunnel which sloped sharply upward. "Goin' into the Lady Slipper," panted Micah. "They won't look for us in there, and if they don't guard the bottom, we can go down on ropes to the trails below." Then the tunnel floor leveled out, and Duke knew that they were on the Lady Slipper level. Suddenly he stumbled and sprawled against the side of the drift. Micah Cates was swearing and floundering around. "Got a match?" wheezed Micah. Duke found one and scratched it on the wall. Lying in the center of the tunnel was the crumpled body of Louis Yen, and the matchlight flickered on the long-bladed knife beside him. "Black got him," croaked Micah, steadying himself with both hands while he peered down at Louis Yen. "Look out for Black." They stumbled on, going more cautiously now. The tunnel grew lighter now, as though they were approaching daylight. Then it widened into a big stope. To the left was the mouth of a tunnel, like the bore of a giant cannon, and silhouetted against the moonlight, crawling toward the opening, was a huge, animal-like figure. As they stopped, they could hear it whimpering, like an animal that had been whipped severely. "My God, it's Black," croaked Micah hoarsely. The figure had reached the edge, and now it seemed to grasp a rope, swing over the rim and disappear. Duke started for the opening, but Micah grasped him by the arm. "Luck must be here, Steele. To hell with Black." They turned and staggered back through the stope, where they found Luck's sled, bound with ropes and lying against a pile of broken rock. Her face was like a white mask in the dim light, and she did not speak while Duke cut the ropes from her. Lying beside her was a big, white sombrero with Mexican silver trimmings. Duke picked it up and put it on his head. Luck was watching him closely, and now she tried to get to her feet, but she had been bound for so long that her arms and legs were paralyzed. Duke started to pick her up, but she stopped him. "Don't touch me," she begged him. "Why did you do this to me? Why, I thought I could trust you." "Haul on, Luck," wailed Micah. "Me and Louis thought the same thing, but Steele never done it. Don't ya remember that he was fightin' Black when they grabbed you?" "Someone hit my head," said Luck painfully. "I don't remember anything after that until I woke up here. That hat was there on the rocks." Black laughed at me. "Well, Steele never harmed ya, Luck. He had Louis Yen follow Black so as to find ya." "They fought," said Luck in a flat voice. "It seemed like hours. I couldn't see all of it. There was only one shot fired, and I think Black lost his gun. Did Louis get killed, Micah?" "Yeah, I guess so, Luck," sadly. "There's been hell raised in Calico tonight, but it's too long to explain it to ya now. Me and Steele got away from 'em. I dunno what we're goin' to do now." "We're goin' to take Miss Luck back to her home," said Duke. "And we're goin' to see what we'll see, Micah. Anyway, we just wanted to find her, didn't we? What matters after that, old pardner?" "Don't say that," begged Luck. "I'm sorry I thought that you—" "Tha's all right, Luck, we'll get ya home." "But I don't want you to. I don't know what to say. I've tried to think that you would do this, but I couldn't convince myself. Don't you believe me, Duke Steele?" "Yes, I do, Luck. Meb you'll have to trust me a lot for a while now. If Calico ain't right, it's the desert for all of us, little girl. So ya see you've got to trust me a lot." "All right, Duke Steele." "Can ya walk, Luck?" asked Micah. "Not very fast, but I guess I can walk a little." Walking was a painful experience, after being bound tightly for so long, but Luck was game. Back into the sloping tunnel they went, feeling their way along, expecting momentarily to find the body of Louis Yen, but it was not there. "Where did he go?" complained Micah. "I ask ya, where did he go steal?" "Meb he wasn't dead," suggested Duke. "Chinamen have as many lives as a cat." They came out on the ledge at the mouth of the tunnel. Below them lay the town, dark save for the lights at the front of the silver bar. They could hear muffled cheers, yells, exultation rather than anger. There was no sign of pursuit. Micah led the way down to Luck's cabin, but she would not go in. "I'm going with you," she declared firmly. "That silver bar belongs to me and I'm going down there." And without a word of further protest, Duke led the way down the street. There was no one in sight, but the silver bar was a roar of voices, the cheering of drunken men. Straight in through the mass of humanity they went, until they reached the fringe of a huge circle, where a queer sight met their gaze. Lemoyne, only half conscious, his face and head bruised and cut badly and his clothes mere strips of rags, was slouched in a chair in the center of the circle. Around his big shoulders was tied a dirty Mexican serape of flaming red, and in his bleeding hand had been thrust a broken whiskey bottle. Fire French, bruised and battered, was assisting Curlew in arranging this mockery, while the crowd cheered wildly. "The King of Mojave," yelped the crowd. "Long live the king." The place was a bedlam. Men were drinking toasts from broken-necked bottles, men who were bleeding, ragged, and sweat-grimed from the battle. A man came shoving through the crowd from the rear, carrying something in a blanket, which he placed on a table. "For the king," shrilled French, "a crown for the king of the desert." Grasping the piece of blanket in both hands, he upended it on top of Lemoyne's massive head and yanked the blanket away. It had contained a number of great cacti, which dug their spines into Lemoyne's head. He swayed his head like a wounded buffalo, but was too weak to shake them off. "The king is crowned," yelled the crowd. "A crown for the king of Mojave Desert, long live the king." French tore a bottle from the hands of a drunken miner and knocked the top off against his boot heel. Lifting his hand above Lemoyne's head, he started to pour out the liquor. Duke was watching him closely and saw that French was staring toward the door. He dropped the bottle, which caromed off Lemoyne's head and fell to the floor. Pete Black was coming slowly through the room, and the crowd stood aside to let him to the center. He had met Louis Yen's long knife in the battle in the tunnel, and the effect was awful to behold. He kept his arms wrapped about his middle, as though fearful of what might happen if he released them. French and Curlew stared at him, as he stumbled up and almost fell into Lemoyne's lap. "Look out," croaked Black. "They found her, that damn chink." Black swayed and tried to straighten up as he turned toward the door, and a whimper of fear came from his lips. Duke grasped Luck by the arm and tried to draw her back. Louis Yen was coming through the room, his old face set and almost white with suffering. In his right hand he carried the long-bladed knife. Black stared at him for a moment, whirled and tried to run, but fell over the feet of Lemoyne and sprawled on his face, his arms wide flung. "You yellow snake!" French fairly shrieked as he whipped out his gun. But Duke was looking for such a move and fired a fraction of a second ahead of French, whose bullet tore into the floor. French groped blindly for the table and fell on his knees. Curlew did not make a move. He seemed paralyzed for a moment and only stared at Duke as he walked up and took Curlew's gun from his unresisting hand. The crowd seemed shocked to inaction, and Duke turned quickly on them. "You fools, do you want to wreck the town to satisfy the greed of some tin horn gamblers?" Curlew is the last one of them left, the last of the crooks that tried to plunder Calico. You all know Luck Sleed. They kidnapped her and hid her in the Lady's Slipper, where we found her tonight. Black and his gang have been high-grading on her, while French and his gang have stolen everything from the silver bar. If you are men, if you have any decency about you at all, tomorrow will not see one of Black's men, nor Slim Curlew, in Calico Town. Swiftly the temper of the crowd changed. Duke's words were words that they understood. Men were dodging out of the door as a group of drunken miners grasped the unlucky Curlew and hurled him out of the place. Duke stepped over and removed the cactus from the head of Lemoyne. He looked at Duke, but there was only a glimmer of intelligence in his eyes. He had been mortally wounded during the fight, and the mockery he had undergone meant nothing to him now. "Lemoyne, do you know me?" asked Duke. "Steele, yes, I know you. It was a good fight." "I brought the girl, Lemoyne. You remember the girl I told you about, Luck Sleed?" "Yes, Steele. Why don't somebody light the lamps?" "Listen, Lemoyne," Duke was talking swiftly against time. "You said she'd get what belonged to her." Lemoyne seemed to rouse up, and his eyes were a little clearer. Several of the miners were standing close, listening, and Lemoyne spoke to them. "Come in closer and listen. No time to write." Lemoyne licked his bloody lips and drew a deep breath. "Everything I've got belongs to Duke Steele. Do you hear that? Everything. I will it to him, and I want you to witness." "But Lemoyne, I don't want it for myself," explained Duke. "I want it for Luck Sleed." "You're a man can hold it," mumbled Lemoyne thickly. "I think you'll share things together now, pay back what you can steal, no lights here." "The passing of a king," said Duke softly. "I hope he won't be misjudged." "What did he mean?" whispered Luck. "He said that we would share things together, Duke." Louis Yen had been hanging onto the back of a chair, and now he grinned softly as he said, "Yo, tack'em, Lil Jill. Yo need a steelong man, Calico need a steelong man, yo Sabe." Duke held out his hand to her, and together they went out into the desert night, while behind them huddled the dead figure of a man who aspired to a desert crown, and gazed with unseeing eyes as a crippled miner clasped hands with a crippled and very old Chinaman, and limped out of the door after them.